Welcome, everyone, to the Monday, September 1st edition of the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm Joe Bartel. You can follow me at Twitter at JB Fantasy Sports. Alongside me every Monday, Jake Letarski. You can follow me at Roto. Jake, it's it. I mean, we have NFL football taking place in just a couple of days. Week one officially kicks off for everyone else here on Sunday. We're going to give you all the waiver wire priority needs that you have to have filled out prior to week one. There's a few candidates that I think are different depending on when you drafted in leagues, and universal guys that I want to make sure, and Jake wants to make sure that we have out there everywhere. So typically for those listening for the first time on a waiver wire show, we'll go through our top 5 waiver wire ads. Both Jake and I have a different list that we've built out. Sometimes they'll be similar players. Sometimes there'll be different situations. For example, super flex leagues we'll talk about, or deeper leagues in future weeks. But overall, we're going to go over our top 5 waiver wire ads right away, and then we'll dive into a bit more of the positional part of things in deeper formats and leagues that you kind of want to prioritize what that would look like. So, Jake, another year under the books, kicking off waiver wire show. I'm excited to do this with you.
Yeah, absolutely. This has been a thing for at least 5 years running, where we've gone position by position, changed it up a little bit last year to just hit the top 5 guys for each of us right off the bat. So we'll do that. Just a reminder before we do that, during the season, we try to keep this under 50% on Yahoo. Is what we usually use as a standard format, 12 team, half PPR. Most FAAB recommendations are based on $100 budget here. Of course, this week we bend the rules a little bit because, like, you and I have both been doing drafts since June, right? And some of these leagues have had very late waiver wire periods. They do a pre-week 1 period, and there are some players that are going as high as the 6th round in drafts that are happening today that were just not on the radar back in June. So we're going to hit those guys first, and it's a couple of those guys that break our 50% rostered rule.
Yeah, let's do it. I mean, depending on when you drafted, this player is going to be universally available or would have been taken, let's just say, you said 6th round, which is fair. I've seen him in a few NFFC leagues, but Jacorey Croskey-Merritt, running back for the Commanders. You and I had this conversation last week a little bit about the Commanders' backfield and how it break up. I talked about this on the Angel Fire radio show 2 weeks ago on Sunday, now moving to Saturday nights here, moving forward for the NFL season. This is probably the most discussed 7th round selection that I have had at least recent memory. I think back to like James Robinson, for example, with the Jacksonville Jaguars, who was a UDFA, ended up being relevant. And there are going to be some people that have this conversation wrong. And I think we'll get into it. We'll talk about the Commanders' backfield overall throughout the podcast. But right away, if Jacorey Croskey-Merritt is available, only 25% of Yahoo leagues is he out there. What is the waiver wire FAAB priority that you put on this? I think the number one claim right away, but from a FAAB perspective, what's the budget that you're putting into Croskey-Merritt?
Exactly. So yeah, Croskey-Merritt is the big hype guy, and breaking most rules for ownership, given that he's not quite as available there. So you've heard me talk about this before. I'm a little bit lukewarm. Austin Eckler's still there. Chris Rodriguez is still there to get early down work. So I'm lukewarm on that. But the upside of him is obviously if you're tuning in and listening to shows for the first time, Brian Robinson was traded to the 49ers here. Croskey-Merritt has been working his way up the depth chart. He sat the final preseason game, which kind of suggests that he's viewed as a starter or in the starting group. Now, I've been very, very clear that I will not pay his current draft price to get him because of some of those, the X factors of, having a 3-horse backfield. It could almost be like the Chiefs last year before Kareem Hunt. We were talking about Case and Steele and these types of guys here. So I'm hesitant in that sense to pay his draft price. However, if you can get him for nothing to essentially for no draft pick or your last draft pick.
Big difference there. Yep,
season,
keep going.
Yes, there's a huge, huge difference between spending FAAB money and using a 4th, 5th, 6th round pick on this guy, which is kind of the helium he's getting. So, yes, I have those concerns. But, yes, in one of our RotoWire leagues, our super flex leagues, again, where we drafted in June, and I took Joe Mixon before we really knew much about his injury history, and I'm kind of hurting for a running back. I needed a starting running back, and he was out there. We have $1,000 budget there, and I went ahead and I spent $735 of that dollars. That's almost 3/4 of the whole budget.
Who was the next bid on that?
Yes, so I overshot it a little bit. The next closest was $500, so $50 in your standard, followed by $388 and $232. And for what it's worth, I also won Chris Rodriguez for $10 in that one. So basically just your dollar player here. So yes, I overshot the bid with Croskey-Merritt, and that's as someone who's generally skeptical at least at his price. But I needed a week one starting back. I needed, my depth is hurt by a couple situations there. I've got Stephon Diggs who's banged up. I've got Rashee Rice who's suspended. Obviously, the Joe Mixon situation might not be able to count on him all year. But that's what I went ahead and bid almost 3/4 of my budget on Croskey-Merritt, just because there was a need there. If I didn't absolutely need a week one starter, I would have probably been closer to the $450, $500, $45, $50 FAAB range. But that's what I paid because I knew I needed to get him, and that's what it took to get him. I wouldn't be surprised. I was actually a little surprised that nobody else got a little bit closer in that bid, and I could have saved maybe $235.
Let's give some context to this for the listeners, and I think this is really good. I mean, Jake, you've been doing this a long time. You've been playing in FAAB leagues a long time. That you went over by $200. That's not surprising to me, or I'm sorry, that's not bad or crazy in my mind at all. Like you were in a circumstance where you had Joe Mixon, you have Rashee Rice. There are multiple people injured in this league, in the Superflex league you're referring to. The benches are very shallow. I'm sorry, deep as well. Like they're very deep. There are not many players available at this point. So in this context, hey, here is a guy that's currently being valued in the NFFC around the 7th round. You can get a 7th round guy for just 3/4 of your budget when realistically you're not going to be able to see many of these other players that qualify in that same range.
Exactly.
Zero issue with that.
Exactly. If I'm wrong, if I'm wrong, whatever. But if I'm right, if he is actually worth a 6th round, 7th round pick, it's somebody that I get the entirety of the NFL season before the season even began. So yes, I hamstring myself as far as getting waivers later in the year. I'm confident enough I can kind of finagle it a little bit and get crafty with guys I might need. But yeah, for this context, it was that. The bid is probably lower in most standard leagues where this situation happens. But yeah, I'm just trying to put a real life example there as to why he's the number one pick and what you might have to pay to go get him.
Okay, so let's talk about this then a little bit further. Let's just say you did a draft in early August and you're playing in a 1 quarterback, 2 running backs, 3 receivers, a standard enough 12-team league. Jacorey Croskey-Merritt was probably not drafted in those. And I would imagine in that sort of league format, you're looking at Croskey-Merritt and saying, okay, on a $100 budget, let's 100,000 doesn't matter. What is the option? Like, what would you choose to do? Because I think so I guess for everyone listening right now, we do this podcast every Monday. We'll do it probably a little bit earlier. Most times it's not a holiday, but we'll do this podcast every Monday, sometime around noon Eastern, Central Time, whatever it is.
Commute. We'll have it ready for your evening commute for those.
This will be in conjunction with the Waiver article that I'm posting every single week on RotoWire. You can go ahead and read that for free this week. It's outside the paywall, but future weeks it'll be blocked behind there. YouTube 15 gets you 15% off the RotoWire subscription, whether you're listening to this right now or reading it online. We're going to have this video overlaid in the article itself moving forward, so we have both the visual and the written aspect of the waiver wire. I put down in that article $24 or 24% of it. I was thinking $100 budget. That will probably not win JCM in leagues where he is available. I want to be clear on this right now that 1/4 of your budget, which is all I felt comfortable recommending to everyone subscribing to RotoWire or listening to this, 1/4 of your budget probably won't win. In Jake's scenario, where he needed a fill-in for Joe Mixon, for Rashee Rice, in a league that had not many other, we would assume, valuable waiver wire guys.
Really,
I don't blame you for pushing up to 3/4 of it. And there were 2 other people who went 50%. So understand this. Yep. It matters significantly the format that you're in to how much you want to spend for JCM.
Exactly.
I think we have to point out that this is a player who 3 years at Alabama State had less than 500 yards rushing, was under 4 yards, right around 4 yards a carry, and only when he was 22 years old in the Mountain West Conference for I'm blanking the college right now, but not a very good college in the Mountain West Conference, ends up going over 1,000 yards. It took him till his final year, effectively in college. He had one more year and then played one game because of scholarship issues with it. It took him his final year against teenagers in the Mountain West Conference to end up going over 1,000 yards rushing. That matters to me. Yes. I don't care what the coaching staff says for the Commanders. It matters to me that we didn't see this at all in college when there should have been situations where he could have. Compared to Chris Rodriguez, who you also picked up for literally free, by the way. Mm-hmm. He had nearly 1,000 yards rushing twice in SEC competition. So you can get all gassed up like I am doing in the opposite right now for Jacorey Croskey-Merritt, but understand we didn't see this at all in college, and you are buying hype if you're choosing to put 50% or more of your budget in normal leagues. Jake's not one of them. In normal leagues, if you're going to say, I'm wasting half my budget on this guy.
My number in a standard league, I think, would be $37. If that makes sense. Okay. If you can get them for nothing. Again, and it depends up or down based on your team need. If you're confident in your running backs, I could see sitting this one out and letting someone pay and then throwing like a $22 enforcement bid there just in case.
I think there's a number of other guys just on this waiver wire, probably next week's waiver wire, and likely to the future as we have this really amazing rookie class situations that might be able to develop that I don't want to forfeit 1/4 or a half of my budget to go ahead and get a guy that I don't think is that talented. I understand the situation. I understand what we've been told by the coaching staff. I don't think this guy is talented. So this is just Joe Bartel saying it. Jake Letarski is obviously different, and there are a number of other fantasy experts far smarter than me who would disagree with my statement, but I don't think this guy is all that talented. We will have to see. He is number one on the waiver wire priority if he is available, but again, 25% of Yahoo leagues, most of them being drafted over the past weekend and a half, he is not available from a waiver wire perspective. So let's move on to number two on this list for you, Jake.
My number two, in a similar sense, breaking the rule because he's 64% rostered, but another guy that you might find yourself available if your league drafted earlier in the summer. That's Nick Chubb of the Houston Texans. He's my number two pickup because, well, like we said with Joe Mixon, he's out at least 4 weeks, possibly longer. The GM does not believe that, he was non-committal on saying he'll be back at all this season. So you go to the Texans backfield, and Nick Chubb, coming off injury, appears to be the guy that's ready to go and take this starting job here. Now, I have some skepticism there too. Like, how healthy is he? Will he have the same explosiveness? I still think he's better than Dameon Pierce. I don't think Woody Marks is going to come in as a rookie, take the whole workload. Daria Gumbawale, longtime third down back, special teams. Woody Marks is the other guy that maybe you want to look just because of that rookie upside. I still am not sure he's an every down back. He should get some work. But as of right now, Nick Chubb is a week one starter. And, as long as he holds up, at least for the first 4 weeks, possibly longer, you have a running back and an offense that, yes, took a step back last year, but I believe is good on the whole. So Nick Chubb in a similar situation. He's my number two pickup.
Bobby Sloak now gone, former offense coordinator for the Texans. You have a new one here of the Rams regime, the Sean McVay regime of offense coordinator for the Texans. More importantly, I think Nick Chubb is the guy that gets the carries and can still do some pass catching stuff. But if nothing else, Woody Marks, Daria Gumbawale, even Dameon Pierce, they augment the Nick Chubb thing. So I would agree with you as well.
There's a good chance we'll be talking about one of those other backs on next week's show. I can say that. But for now, early down work, Nick Chubb.
I have Texans backfield just conglomerate as list number 3 on my waiver wires. I had Woody Marks as the guy highlighted this week in the pre-week 1 waiver wire article. If Woody Marks is available, you think about all these other guys, and we'll get to a few more of the rookie running backs a bit in the show. If Woody Marks is available in your league, chances are he won't be next week because I think he'll be involved in the offense enough where, at least as a pass catcher, we have to have this conversation. So I think it's worth just trying to get him a little bit right now. Like if you have a roster spot free,
we'll get into the full list here when we go position by position. But there is something to be said. If you drafted in June or if your rosters are deeper, you might have a guy or two you can put on IR. You might have a guy or two that got cut. You want to have no dead weight on your roster. You want to, the best fantasy players are reevaluating every week, and if that means grabbing some of these guys for a lower price just in case you beat the big surge next week, if they come out and have a big role, that would definitely be one of them as well.
Number 2 on my list, and one that was not on your list at all, I'm surprised a little bit, was Mason Taylor, rookie tight end for the Jets. I will keep pounding the table. I just did my final team totals for this year, Jake. I'm not sure if you saw it on my Twitter, JB Fantasy Sports. I'm in 17 lineup setting leagues this year. I have Mason Taylor in 7 of the 17 leagues. Those were all drafted. This was not waiver wire pickups. He's only rostered in about 8 to 12% of Yahoo leagues right now, and I think comfortably he's around tight end 15 entering this season. And maybe that's not an attractive thing for you. Maybe it's like, oh, well, I mean, David Njoku is probably going to be better. I mean, that's true. We are going to be talking about Mason Taylor a lot for the next couple weeks, I think, until people realize, oh, well, 4 for 60 isn't bad, especially in full point PPR leagues. And what if he ends up getting 6 for 60? And now we're talking about a 12-point on average tight end for a position that I think is really lacking outside the top 4 or 5. So Mason Taylor, I think, is one that I want to get ahead on, especially when I look at that Jets receiving core, which is going to be starting Josh Reynolds. And when Allen Lazard's healthy and back, this is brutal. And I know Justin Fields is not a good quarterback. That's fine. That's not the argument. It's 2025. Passing is going to equate volume, and I think Mason Taylor is primed to be in a spot where he can get at least 4 or 5 catches a game.
Yeah, no, I'm right there with you on that. And Mason Taylor, I think I've got him down on my in the tight end section later. He's only 12% rostered. I think if your league didn't draft Mason Taylor, it might be okay to wait. but you might also have to pay another big price next week. So, just keeping that in mind. And he was close. He barely missed the cut from my list. And that's because I wanted to get a few of these other guys in. Number 3 being another guy that didn't quite make your list, but this guy actually fits our ownership threshold. He's at 49% on Yahoo, and that is Keenan Allen of the LA Chargers here. This Chargers team, I know Keenan Allen is entering his age 33 season, and he signed a little bit late here. I believe, what did he sign on August 5th? But a 1 year, $8.5 million deal is not anything to scoff about here. He obviously has chemistry with Justin Herbert and the quarterback. He played some of his best seasons, with Herbert. Basically, he had 300-yard reception years, his best touchdown year, his 2 best reception years. Granted, some of that was, with the extra game. But yeah, overall, I think Keenan Allen is someone that can help your team. Now, the only leagues I looked through all 12 of my leagues that have drafted, and he was only a free agent in 2 of them, and one of them is a league that just starts 2 wide receivers. So I like Keenan Allen as an addition, possible starter here, because since his signing, Quentin Johnston had that really nasty preseason concussion. He's still in protocol. Yep. And rookie Trey Harris has been sitting out of team drills with an undisclosed injury. We're not going to know. We'll get more clarity when we get our practice reports for the Chargers this week. But it's a receiving core that's banged up. Yes, this team is going to be a run-first team, I believe, with Amari and Hampton. And even Najee Harris was cleared for contact this week. And they're talking like he might be able to play week 1. But overall, I mean, we have him as wide receiver 2 on the depth chart. I think Keenan Allen can be a reasonable contributor here for fantasy football players.
Yeah, I haven't been buying him. I would rather have the upside guys like Isaac Tesla or before the injured reserve stint, Jalen Coker for the Panthers post Adam Thielen trade. But I understand the premise for it. Again, at right around 50% rostered, a lot of people are also of the same belief. And I think Keenan Allen carries more name recognition than fantasy football utility, but that doesn't mean he has 0 fantasy football utility. So I had him off the list mainly because I didn't want to include guys, or I try not to include guys that are at that spot. But I think especially if we're doing this pre-week 1, there are certainly leagues in which Keenan Allen was not drafted. It makes sense to go ahead and to mention him as well too.
And if we go back to RotoWire Superflex, which has it's kind of it's a redraft league technically. Out of $1,000 budget, 122 was the winning bid, followed by 110, which Allen beat me by $12, and then another $100 bid. So you're looking like a $10 to $12 player if he's out there in a standard league.
Yeah, which is fair. Well, not standard, full point PPR. That's what the
Yes, you're right. Full point PPR. Man.
Standard's a different question. I don't know if he should be rostered in standard leagues, but that's a different part of this. Let's move over to number 4, who is 4th on both of our lists. That's Ollie Gordon, rookie running back for the Dolphins. Now, if you've played in Devy leagues or leagues in which you're kind of speculating college players, there was a period of time where Ollie Gordon was the number 1 player and then completely fell off his last year in college and then subsequently became a day 3 pick for the Dolphins. I continue to make this statement, and I'll do it on every podcast here moving forward. There is no way in which Devon Achane sees a similar workload to what he did last year, or if he does, Mike McDaniel and company are going to be fired. Maybe that's what they want to do. Maybe it's just a full shuffle of everything in the coaching staff. But if Mike McDaniel wants to keep his job, I don't think there's a situation in which Devon Achane sees as much playing time as he did last season. And by the way, already entering with a hamstring injury, which of course he should be ready for week 1, but never want those soft tissue injuries to start the season, especially for a guy as small as Achane. So enter the power back Ollie Gordon, who will have a role on this team, and more importantly, Alexander Madison is on injured reserve. Like the only other competition for that role isn't there. So Ollie Gordon needs to be picked up in, I think, most formats now at this point.
Yeah, with Madison on IR, and Jalen Wright has an injury too. He's already doubtful for week 1 after having a leg surgery. Could miss several weeks. They haven't IR'd him yet. So maybe they'll keep him around just in case here. But Ollie Gordon was going ahead of Jalen Wright even before the injury as far as, preseason pecking orders. So that to me says something there. And yeah, exactly like you said about Achane. He's been around a late 2nd, early 3rd round pick, I think, in drafts. 5'9", 188-pound back should be handling a full workload anyway. Obviously, Achane is I think going to be a far better per touch option. And I would play devil's advocate and say if McDaniel and company wants to keep their job, they need to use him because he is good. But of course, if that ends up in him getting another injury or making his current injury worse, then all of a sudden Ollie Gordon, who's only 34% rostered, by the way, could just have a big impact in all of fantasy. And he's someone you absolutely want to get on your roster ahead of week 1. In all the drafts I've done for the last week, he's been taken. But those early drafts, he's a name that definitely wasn't so much on the radar in redraft. Now he's 100% on the radar.
I mentioned the last guy on my top 5 list is Chris Rodriguez, and probably the one universally across the 17 leagues that I've planted that he is available if I didn't already take him. It should cost you nothing to go ahead and speculate on this, even in deeper leagues, but I continue to make the statement that he'll be at least a part of the backfield with Austin Eckler and Jacorey Croskey-Merritt for significantly less of the price. But who is the last player on your top 5 waiver list, Jake?
The last one, I went with kind of a dart throw, a big swing here, kind of a hype guy, a late hype guy, and that's Isaac Tesla of the Lions. Yes, he's buried on that depth chart a little bit too much. He might even be 4th on the depth chart there, but he's interesting because he had a pretty good preseason performance that led the Lions to trade Tim Patrick, who would get on the field as a wide receiver 3 there. He was only $3-4 in the RotoWire Superflex we did, so again, it's not going to cost you a whole lot, but it's kind of a home run swing. You're hoping you're going to get a guy that, not Puka Nacua, but as far as if he came out and had a really crazy season, that's the only situation, you're hoping for here. I don't think he cuts into Amon-Ra St. Brown and Jameson Williams touches, but it's a new offensive coordinator there. Anything can happen when the competition opens up here. He probably does need an injury to really hit it big and be a big fantasy guy this year, but it's someone with pretty wide availability out there in 91% of Yahoo leagues. And it might be worth a swing.
Deontay Thornton for the Raiders also kind of qualifies in the same big play, hopefully home run thing. Again, before the Jalen Coker injury, Jalen Coker was in that spot too, post Adam Thielen trade. If you have IR stash spots, Jalen Coker makes a lot of sense. Otherwise, I think he's probably a good candidate to drop. And I mentioned, or there's at least one league in which I'll have to probably pick up Hunter Renfrow, who is the replacement for Jalen Coker in the Panthers. Not a good spot to be in if your roster already needs Hunter Renfrow in week 1, but I'm in a deep enough league where that kind of makes sense. Even with the Scott Fish Bowls, for example, Renfrow probably is one of those that you have to at least keep an eye on as well for the Panthers. So that does it for us on our top 5 list. Jacorey Croskey-Merritt, Nick Chubb, Keenan Allen, Ollie Gordon, Isaac Tesla. I also had Mason Taylor, Woody Marks in that, and Chris Rodriguez too. So bang for your buck. 8 players in your top 5 list pre-week 1.
Like the title says.
Exactly. There you go. So we'll get to the actual positions to kind of break it down a bit more, but here's a word from our sponsors. Renegade Fantasy. Fantasy football players, aren't you done watching your season crumble because of injuries or underperforming players? Well, join the RotoWire League today on the Renegade Fantasy app, the only app that lets you substitute players in real time. Go to rotowire.com, renegadefantasy.com, and join today. With Renegade, you're not just a GM, you're the coach. No more losing Sundays, no more lost points. You call the shots, you make the moves, you win the league. Step out of the luxury box and onto the field. This is fantasy football without limits. This is Renegade Fantasy. Join the RotoWire League today and win. Visit rotowire.renegadefantasy.com and join the league today. All right, we're going to get to the quarterback position here. And I had put it in my article last week. Trevor Lawrence was only at 40% rostered in Yahoo leagues over the subsequent 10 days. That's risen now to about 50%. Again, for future weeks, we're going to try to stick to under 50% on our threshold when discussing these podcasts. But just worth reiterating, if we're having to have a week 1 starter, I don't mind Trevor Lawrence in this new Liam Cohen offense. If you like Travis Hunter against this Panthers defense, which, yes, we'll have Derek Brown back, we'll have J.C. Horn back, but otherwise was a defense that was massively underperforming last year.
Yeah, I just threw Trevor Lawrence on the list for the sole reason that he starts the year not only versus Carolina, but then he's at Cincinnati. And we've talked about Cincinnati and their defense at length when, hyping up Burrow and the weapons there, that that defense couldn't stop anybody last year and hasn't really gotten much better. So great matchups week 1 and 2. Now, after that, we'll see what the schedule lies and how he's done, because if he doesn't go out and kill it and get you at least 25 a game in the first 2 weeks, then I'd maybe be a little bit worried. But he would be the top guy that I did see out there in a lot of leagues there, right at that 50% threshold. The other one comes from your article, Joe.
Yeah, Tua Tagovailoa. And I mentioned it. We talked about this last week on the over-under win totals. I don't think the Dolphins will be very good this year. Whether Tua stays healthy is indifferent in my mind. If you need a 1-week starter, I have zero faith in the Colts being a competent franchise this year, and that includes defensively. And Tua is healthy this week. Yeah, Tyreek Hill is healthy this week. Jalen Waddle is healthy this week. Theoretically, the Dolphins' offense should be at a good spot this week. And if you just need a 1-week starter, Tua, who's only rostered in 25% of leagues, probably makes sense to go ahead and do so.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there's not much behind that. He's a generally good quarterback that is healthy. Good quarterback when he's healthy, has weapons, has a great week 1 matchup. So, possible streamer there if you ended up with the bottom barrel of quarterbacks.
In your deeper quarterback leagues, Jake, is there somebody that you're at least rostering or looking at? Because we've had some things cycle out and change since we probably did drafts in early August, but I'm not sure if it's consequential here for week one.
Yeah. We usually do a little bit of a 2 quarterback league segment on our Monday show, just to kind of, during the season, it'll be like who's injured, who might start this week, who could lose their job. You want a speculative ad for 2 quarterback leagues. So a lot of times, in the interest of time, we'll do a quick hitter thing. So in like less than a minute, I'm going to quick run down all of the offseason news that would pertain to 2 quarterback leagues here. Spencer Rattler in New Orleans won that quarterback competition over Tyler Shuck. So there's that. There are some weapons there. Neither of us think they're going to be particularly good, but an interesting option gets on the radar in 2 quarterback leagues. In a similar sense, Daniel Jones won the job over Anthony Richardson in Indy. Doesn't inspire a lot of confidence there, but any starter is relevant in 2 quarterback league. We kind of expected this, but Joe Flacco is the starter in Cleveland, and I believe he gets the Bengals in week 1. So, another good matchup there. Mm-hmm. We all figured Cam Ward would eventually be the starter here, but the other news, the reason I included him was that Will Levis is on IR after season-ending surgery. So it's really Cam Ward with no looking back at anybody else. Brandon Allen is the backup there. And then I wanted to look to the Giants real quick. Russell Wilson, again, probably who we expected would start out of the gates. But Jackson Dart did have a very excellent preseason run. And who knows, if they're not successful early, I could possibly see them going to Jackson Dart sooner rather than later. Russell Wilson turned the ball over a handful of times in the preseason, whereas Jackson Dart was relatively clean. So those are my quick hitters for 2 quarterback leagues.
Let's take a break before we move over to the running backs, again, kind of illustrating what our top 5 list and some of the other deeper options out there. We'll get a word from our sponsors, Blue Wire. All right, we're back again, talk about the running backs. We went over our top 5 list, which included Jacorey Croskey-Merritt. It's not fair. He's rostered in 75% of leagues. If you drafted over the last 2 weeks, he would have been a 7th-round selection. But if you did drafts earlier, like Jake Letarski and I did at the RotoWire Symposium, draft symposium back in June, Croskey-Merritt was one of those guys. And we talked about at the top of the show, what are situations in which you're willing to spend a massive amount of your FAAB or whatever it is on that? You had one of the guys in the chat being like, Jake, are you serious that you actually did it? Again, this is a super flex league, which had deep roster spaces, and very little of these guys are typically available. So 3/4 your budget. I wouldn't do it. I don't believe in the talent, but there are situations like Jake's roster where you had Joe Mixon, he has Rashee Rice, where you have to consider that. And that's why we're discussing it right now, because JCM is at the moment a 7th or 8th round pick and is widely available. Like if you could have a 7th or 8th round pick for FAAB budget, what is that to you? So let's go into a bit more of the Commanders backfield here. Again, we mentioned Austin Eckler as something that's widely drafted too. I have Chris Rodriguez as one of those players that I picked up. You got Chris Rodriguez for effectively free in the Superflex waiver wire that we keep referring to now. I didn't know when the waiver wire date was being run. That was on me for not paying attention. And I'll tell you right now, 10 would not have been the number you won at, Jake, if I was paying attention. So just so everyone's understanding, this isn't like, oh, it's literally free, but I might be one of the only few stands of Chris Rodriguez out there at the moment. So take it with a grain of salt.
That's $1,000 budget, so
right.
$1 and $100 budget. And the rationale is like, in the instance that he becomes the goal line back, he has a bit of utility in a league that deep here. So that's really where I was going with that one.
I will put a 1% or 2% on Chris Rodriguez if he is available in leagues that make sense to do so, and that's pretty standard-ish ones at this point, both in terms of roster and the way the playing size. We talked about Nick Chubb and the Texans' backfield as well too. Nick Chubb right now at 64% rostered in Yahoo leagues typically is over our 50% threshold for the podcast. But just a reminder again, that there are drafts that happened before the last 2 weeks in which Nick Chubb was more consequentially deemed the starter for the Texans. So he is one of those guys that I think you have to look out for and pick up if he is available in your leagues for whatever the reason.
Exactly. And with Woody Marks kind of being the Chris Rodriguez, but for a different reason. Woody Marks maybe being a little bit of a pass catching back, or there's some unknown rookie upside here. So Woody Marks is another one in the Texans backfield.
We talked about Ollie Gordon as well. Charlene in the chat says Ollie Gordon over Jacorey Croskey-Merritt, which I don't mind that, Charlene. I actually think that's sort of where I'm leaning to as well. But that would be a very, very hot take with the way the drafts are going right now. So keep that in mind. But Ollie Gordon made both of our top 5 lists. And I think at this point is somebody that I would be willing to spend probably close to 6% of my budget if he's available in your leagues out there. Did we ever discuss a number with you on Ollie Gordon? Because I guess I'm kind of curious where you land with that.
Yeah, for me, just because there's no guarantees yet, you're waiting on an HN injury, and obviously there are differing opinions on to which degree the likelihood of, or some people say when that will happen. But yeah, I don't think it's a huge bid right now, maybe 8%.
Okay, so you're actually a little bit higher than me. That's fine with that. I think that's about the right call pre-week one. We didn't talk about the Browns' backfield in our top 5 list, and there was actually news today that maybe kind of makes this more difficult.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let me run this down. I was very close to putting Quishon Judkins of the Browns in over Tesla in my top 5. He's right there. Even before today's news, he was pretty highly rostered at 49%. And the thing with Judkins is, okay, he had that those domestic violence charges in Florida; those were cleared. But even before that, he was kind of in a standoff with the Browns front office about guaranteed money as a second-round pick, and he was really the last significant pick that hadn't signed yet. Obviously, missed the preseason, missed camp, he's not under contract. But per Mary Kay Cabot this week, they're looking like they're getting close to reaching a deal and even potentially playing in week one, which is a massive 360 from even a week ago when he was considering going back to college. So it was a contract issue involving guaranteed money. He didn't sign. Now they're apparently still figuring out guaranteed money. But for someone like Mary Kay to say there's even a possibility of him playing in week one after missing all that time, that's significant. And for me, it significantly changes the outlook for Jerome Ford and Dylan Sampson. I mean, we were earlier reacting to the news and saying, grab Jerome Ford as a late round pick. I saw him get drafted as high as rounds 10, in some of these leagues with people looking for a running back. I still think Jerome Ford probably gets most of the touches in week one, but if Judkins is what we think he is, then he could be the guy. So he's definitely worth a FAAB bid if he was left on the wire in your league's draft. So definitely go ahead and look at him. We could be having a very different conversation in our show next week if they're able to work out a deal. But he becomes very interesting because he was who we kind of pegged to be RB1 eventually with the Browns before all this offseason drama happened. Now it's not fully resolved, but at least it looks like they're making steps towards getting it resolved, and his stock shoots way up because in the end, he's a very talented football player.
If Judkins is available in your league and Jacorey Croskey-Merritt is available, I'm spending way more of the FAAB or whatever the waiver part is on Judkins, not Croskey-Merritt, even though we think JCM or Bill is what people would refer to him as otherwise. Will probably play week one and Judkins will not. Like, I think that's an easy call in my mind, and that we had some sort of reinforcement that Judkins will be back sooner rather than later prior to week one probably means that if you don't have Judkins on your roster already, it will be a scramble to go ahead and do so. I think people are now recognizing, this situation is going to be inevitable in terms of the highly drafted second round rookie.
He could very well headline our show next week, but it will also probably sneak up over 50%. So.
Real quick, you had talked about week one specifically for the Browns, Jerome Ford or Dylan Sampson. I have seen Dylan Sampson get drafted ahead of Jerome Ford, and I think there's a bit of rookie bias happening here with the 4th round pick as opposed to Jerome Ford. But just reiterating to everyone, when this situation kind of occurred last year, Nick Chubb had the unfortunate injury. It was Jerome Ford that took on the bulk of the workload and became a fantasy mainstay for the first month or so of the season. I think if the situation occurs again where Judkins doesn't play week one, it's Jerome Ford that has proven to be the bell cow running back, and Dylan Sampson, kind of like what we think with Woody Marks as a pass catcher.
And even Mary Kay, who reported the Judkins news, we have a note from her on our site today that Ford is expected to operate as a workhorse in week one. Now, the question is, what does he do after that? But yeah, it's definitely worth taking a look at Judkins and replacing any dead roster weight with him.
Is there any other speculative ads, especially for saying that we're not even spending any on waiver wire, let's say, or in deeper formats, who are you kind of looking at among the running back position?
I know you featured the Bears running backs in your article, guys that behind DeAndre Swift might see some, the power run usage like your Roschon Johnson types. So maybe there's something there. Otherwise, beyond that, you're kind of looking at handcuffs, essentially. Will Shipley for Saquon Barkley, maybe Tyler Algier for Bijan, Justice Hill, Keaton Mitchell for Derrick Henry, those types of players. So that might be what you're looking at, or even a Mostert, Zamir White instead of for just to protect Gentry. And we're not advocating going and paying anything really to go out and acquire these guys because they're not targets yet. But again, it beats any dead roster spot. Again, if you're making moves now, chances are you drafted early. You might have a guy or two moving to the IR, depending on your league settings. There might be a guy or two that maybe you could cut. So yeah, just a couple of handcuffs to be mindful of.
You mentioned the Bears guys and said Roschon Johnson. Just real quick, Kyle Monungai, their I think day 3 selection, maybe the 7th round selection or UDFA. I don't know which of the two ends up being the David Montgomery if we're to say this Ben Johnson offense just gets replicated in Chicago. But we know that role is valuable, and either it being Monungai or Roschon Johnson, who I think have had various points of positivity in training camp, but also some downsides. Again, if you have a roster spot, if you have a roster space, I'm just looking at one of those two dudes right now in Chicago and saying, hey, something could happen from this. It's possibly to split the workload, that Roschon Johnson and Monungai become David Montgomery on the aggregate, which would be bad for fantasy, but probably makes the Bears better. I don't know. We'll have to kind of see with that breakdown for that. So let's get another word from our sponsors before we transition over to the receivers chalkboard, which I'll be actually working with throughout the season. Cash in on your NFL picks this season with chalkboard. Simply choose more or less on your favorite player stats to win up to 5,000 times your money. For a limited time right now, new players get $20 free with no deposit required. Yes, you heard that right, $20 free just on sign up. See why over 1 million fans have already locked in with chalkboard to turn their sports knowledge into cold, hard cash. Whether you're locking in the perfect slip with alternate lines, using the cash out feature to take your money and run, or hammering the daily promos, today is your chance to win up to $40,000 on a single entry. Stop sitting on the sidelines and get into the game with Chalkboard Fantasy Sports, now available in 30 plus states. Download Chalkboard today and use promo code ROTONFL. That's ROTONFL and get up to $20 free with no deposit required. We had a pretty good question in the chat, Jake, about the receiver waiver wire priority, but real quick, going over again our top 5 list. Keenan Allen made yours. He's right now at the 50% roster threshold on Yahoo. You had Quentin Johnston still banged up, Trey Harris still banged up. It's possible that Keenan Allen right away just emerges as a quality target. And I think somebody in the chat mentioned us disliking Justin Herbert. We are not the dislikers of Justin Herbert. I think we are the Justin Herbert fan club, actually. But I think it is worth acknowledging Rashawn Slater, done for the season, stud left tackle for the Chargers. That will hurt the offensive line, whether we want to acknowledge it truthfully or not, that's not a good thing for that passing attack. So whether it be Lab McConkey or Keenan Allen or both, I don't think there's a whole lot more volume plays out there for this Chargers passing attack outside of those two players.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. Even with, and like we said, Keenan Allen led our receivers off. I think he's the clear pick over the group of possible receivers here. And yeah, no doubt that hurts, but I'd still be in on Keenan Allen as a $1 buy, late round pick in your draft, or limited FAAB acquisition as possible. He made my top 5.
A deeper option that I had not yet figured into the equation yet. If you stick around, I'll be updating the waiver wire article throughout the week on RotoWire, and this guy is already on my list, is Hollywood Brown, who is only rostered in 17% of leagues. Again, Rashee Rice suspended the first 6 games of the season. You have Xavier Worthy, you have Travis Kelce. You don't have a guy that can just vacuum up targets, and while you don't think of Hollywood Brown that way, he did it in college, he did it with the Ravens. There are times with the Cardinals that he was also a vacuum as well for targets. So I think we could see Hollywood Brown in that same sort of mix this year for the Chiefs if there's a lot of volume passing the first couple weeks.
Yeah, pretty much just an early season guy, because I don't know if there'll be much left to go around after Rashee Rice's 6-game suspension is up and he's back in the mix. Because I truly believe Rashee Rice is wide receiver 1 over Worthy once he's back out there on the field. The other factor is Hollywood Brown's been dealing with an ankle injury, though he is expected to be back for week 1. Of course, he came back late last year after missing the majority of the season, too late to really help fantasy managers. Didn't see any action this preseason at all. But wide receiver 2 on a Chiefs offense, I think, he could get in there and sneak up some targets there. It's worth a look at only 17% rostered.
Let's talk about Dante Thornton, the receiver for the Raiders who's making waves in Madden, just an absurd guy for zero reason, being just big and fast. Not necessarily the same way in the real football game, but we'll have to see, because with the Jacoby Myers bit of news that he requested a trade, we'll see if that ends up happening, what kind of capital the Raiders even get back if they want to go ahead and trade their, it feels like, popular slot target for not a whole lot, given where the season starts. That'll be very interesting. But if Jacoby Myers does not play, Thornton will be a guaranteed start, and probably new acquisition Amari Cooper returning to Las Vegas in the first time over 7 or 8 years to play for the black and silver. I don't know. I think Amari Cooper is just about done with his career. I thought the Bills part of things was reminiscent of where Amari Cooper is at, not so much the Bills and Joe Brady doing something offensively that was limiting Amari Cooper, but Thornton or Amari Cooper, is there one that you'd rather roster right now if you're looking at a Las Vegas receiver?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'd go with the upside and go with Thornton because neither of these guys are starting in your week one lineups, but Thornton maybe has a little bit more, there's just that little bit of question mark, uncertainty upside that he could eventually work his way into a role. I mean, he was the preseason guy. He worked well with Geno, 4th round pick. He surpassed 2nd round pick Jack back on the depth chart. That seems pretty clear at this point. So yeah, and again, this all banks on, the Myers situation if he actually does get his trade request granted, which is no guarantee here. Not a huge fan of this offense in general, but
Same.
I don't know. Geno revived himself in Seattle. Maybe he can make something happen here. It's going to be a streaming option at best here. Thornton obviously might be off the board in some dynasty formats at this point. Redraft, it gets really shady. These are guys that are far enough down the list that we can probably pass on in most formats here, but we want to be very thorough here on this show. So he would be one worth a look here. And the Carolina receiver that you mentioned in your article, I also think in a pretty similar boat. Should we talk about Xavier Legette?
Yeah, first off, let's get a question here from the chat from Jacob, and I appreciate everyone following along, watching right now, close to 700 people live at the moment. If you want to be a part of this conversation, if you see my Waiver Wire article throughout the week, we're recording around midday every Monday moving forward on the RotoWire Fantasy Football YouTube channel. We're not doing start-sit stuff. We're not doing here's what's on this roster, tell me how to roster it. Like, that's not what this podcast is for. Maybe there's other places on the RotoWire Fantasy Football Network you can do that. But if you have Waiver Wire specific questions, we'll try to answer them best we can. If you're looking along or watching later in the article or later on the scheduled side of things on the podcast for the RotoWire Fantasy Football, we're doing this throughout the week. So Jacob asks, would you drop Adam Thielen for Tesla for the Lions receiver? And I think this is really interesting because Adam Thielen made my article last week as a Panthers receiver, gets traded to the Vikings. Then it was Jalen Coker, and all Jalen Coker's on injured reserve. It took about Hunter Renfrow as a pickup. The reality is there's probably a number 2 receiver for the Panthers that's worth it between Jalen Coker, Hunter Renfrow, unlikely, or Xavier Legette. And more importantly, would you be dropping Adam Thielen in this instance without that transition over to the Vikings?
Yeah, so this is interesting because he mentions that he's wide receiver 5, right? So you're not starting either of these guys week 1. Mm-hmm. If you needed a week 1 starter, you'd probably throw Thielen over or Tesla. But in this case, where you're not starting them, I actually think you would make that move. Go for the unknown, the upside, because Thielen, you're not starting him early. You might not even start him for the first 3 weeks. His utility is really while Jordan Addison is suspended. And when he comes back, I just don't think there's enough targets to go around there that Thielen's suddenly going to be a big piece of that. Also, Jalen Naylor is around. He actually had some good weeks early on in the year when Addison wasn't around. Now Jalen Naylor has that hand injury, but he's should be expected for week 1. So I think it's just a little crowded there. I don't see as much utility in Thielen, especially after those first 3 weeks. So I would go for the unknown. And if it doesn't look like Tesla's going to see the field, then you can always change course and go to one of our other guys that we pick up. But for now, I'll take some upside over somebody that you're probably dropping in week 4 anyway.
I like the upside call. I had mentioned in the chat, I'm not sure, but it really depends on what you want to do with the roster. At wide receiver 5, maybe upside is the right part of this with Tesla, who had 3 preseason touchdowns for the Lions. It seems to be at least a candidate for the boundary receiver role in an offense that we like a lot. So back to Xavier Legette overall. I don't want to go ahead and roster Xavier Legette just about anywhere, but there is draft capital that probably matters in this. And while we're all enamored with Tedero McMillan for the Panthers, the top 10 draft pick, Xavier Legette was also a first-round selection last year too. Didn't do well. But if you have optimism about the Panthers offense, maybe Xavier Legette is the right call.
Yeah, I mean, he just has a clear path to being wide receiver 2 over there. He sat with the starters for the final preseason game. Obviously, Adam Thielen traded away, like you said. Jalen Coker is starting the year on IR with a quad injury, and just kind of a little bit breaking news from earlier today. He's going to miss 4 to 6 games here. So the door is open. This is an opportunity situation. Could be one of the last calls on him to really show that he can be a contributor in this league and for this organization here. But again, we always say it's half skill, half opportunity. And you'd think at one point he had the skill given his draft pedigree. He definitely has the opportunity now, so he's worth a mention.
Is there any other speculative ads at receiver that people should be looking at in deeper formats?
I looked through our dynasty FAAB. Isaiah Bond for the Browns got bid on for like $1 or 11 out of 1,000. Efton Chisholm for the Patriots got $7 out of 1,000. Really only that type of format where you're going that deep here. You did mention Naominor in the article here. What's the logic there?
The idea is I just want possibility of getting the Titans number 2 receiver correct. Right now it's Tyler Lockett. You're going to have another boundary receiver too that maybe makes a difference. But I think Naominor or even Restrepo, who was Cam Ward's favorite receiver in Miami last year, I don't mind being speculative on that with the idea that the Titans offense is not going to be as bad as it was last year. Like, I think Cameron Ward's a really, really good quarterback and is not being discussed enough. He's definitely better than Will Levis, which obviously is a low bar to jump over. Same with Mason Rudolph. And if you could say in 2025, there's at least 2 receivers on every team that have fantasy consequence. I wonder if it is Elliot Umnar, who is the guy I kind of consider, and literally is effectively free out there. There are only a few leagues in which I would even consider that of the 17 that I'm in. So I'd imagine most of the listeners, it's a little bit different as well too. But I just wanted to make sure I had a deeper name out there at receiver because we have a lot for running back, but not so much for the receiver position.
Yeah, no, and I see that logic. You might as well shoot. And I think it's good for Cam Ward that, he doesn't have any possible starter, any competition like looming over his head. They're not going to, if he has a couple bad games, they're not going to throw Brandon Allen in there, right? Whereas if Levis was healthy, had a decent shoulder, and like they were okay, but Cam Ward wasn't showing much early on, I could see him maybe making a move, like a coach attempting to keep it in good standing type of situation here. But no, Cam Ward has the keys to the offense, and they're not looking back, so he doesn't need to feel threatened with the bad performance. And I think the offense will be good. Okay, you retract that. I don't know if it'll be good. It'll be better than last year, which is a very, very, very low bar. But I expect them to improve.
Real quick before we move over to the tight ends and the defensive kicker spot, we'll get a word from our sponsors, Fantasy Sports Knockout. Fantasy Sports Knockout, where Fantasy League meets a knockout pool. It's an innovative take on fantasy football. The concept, though, is pretty simple. Choose a new fantasy lineup each week, score points the same way you would in any fantasy league, but you must choose your players wisely because you can only use them one time. The lowest weekly score or group of scores is eliminated from the contest every week. The contest may be simple, but survival is definitely not. How will you play? Load up early on stars, or play the matchups and save the better players for later. Fantasy Sports Knockout. Can you survive the fantasy? Sign up at play.fantasysportsknockout.com today. I know that I'm going to be really annoying for probably quite a while on the Mason Taylor love. I really think that he's going to be a value target in that Jets offense. I think back to the Andrew Luck selection for the Colts. The next pick they took was Coby Fleener. Like, if you want your quarterback to develop, typically the old adage is get a tight end that can do so, and Mason Taylor did that in college. There's a number of other guys that I think kind of qualify, but at least in this podcast, at least one portion of it is going to be the Mason Taylor side of things every single day. So he's my favorite waiver.
Well, yeah, and you drafted Taylor as like a backup tight end anyway in most cases here. Maybe you totally punted tight end and ended up with him, but you drafted him as a backup. You could afford to let him sit on the bench for a couple weeks just to kind of see what the snap share, see what the target share ends up being, and then going from there. So yeah, Mason Taylor is definitely the top guy if he's available. I kind of jumped on that bandwagon with you a little bit and got myself a handful of shares of him. I definitely got him at auction in one of my big friends league this week for only a couple bucks, and I'm confident there too. The only other tight end I really thought I'd mention, just because again, with the theme of this show being guys whose news has changed. I mean, Darren Waller wasn't even on a roster if you drafted in June because they signed him on July 1st, and then of course they trade Jonnu Smith to the Steelers. I'm talking about the Miami Dolphins here. Now we list him atop the depth chart here. He's participated in team drills, and I guess he's expected to handle a decent workload week one. We saw $10 and $11 bids in the Superflex league. That is 1,000. So he's basically a dollar player on a $100 budget, and that's if your rosters are pretty deep. But I'm not super huge on it, and I know you're not big on the Dolphins in any case, but Darren Waller is another one I mentioned that I'm seeing get taken late in quite a few of these late drafts that I'm doing, so maybe give him a look.
There's people that are in on Zach Ertz or Hunter Henry at cost. This is fine. The upside play is Mason Taylor, but recognize that really tight end 15 through 25 are more or less the same. Chigakonkwo the same way. We were talking about the Titans offense with Iomanor a little bit earlier. if you think that Cam Ward can make them even competent, let's
Yep.
just say top 20, top 25, Chika also kind of fits that quality.
All those guys right on the Kate Otten line. Is that what we deemed it?
Yeah, that's right. Thank you.
The
It's
Kate
the Kate
Otten
Otten
line for
flash.
tight ends is like the replacement level in fantasy, who, by the way, Otten has a leg injury, but is back in practice, which is encouraging. I don't think he should be rostered really, but I think that's the line that we're going to set here. And Chig Okonkwo is right on that line too. Brenton Strange, it might be a hair above that line, but not by a whole lot. All those names are pretty interchangeable right now, but why not go with the upside in Mason Taylor?
All right, defenses real quick. Jake, is there anyone from a streaming perspective you're looking at this week?
Yeah, we're really not going to talk about kickers much on the show unless something totally crazy happens kicker-wise. But defense streamers, if we have time, we'll try to get a few of them. And again, with it being week 1, the defense you took is probably who you're going to throw out there. But I don't know if you took the Packers defense with Micah Parsons, do you want to start him against the Lions week 1, even at home? There are a couple of teams with pretty tough matchups here. I mean, just for example, let's see what
the Bills against the Ravens, the Chiefs, a tough opponent as well too. Somebody was asking about the Giants defense against the Commanders. Like, no, we could do better than a lot of these places.
Exactly. So I mean, there was even a draft that I did as recently as last week. I think it was Tuesday or Wednesday where I just didn't take a defense, and I figured I'd pick one up instead. And so the defense I picked up there was the Washington Commanders. They're home against the Giants. Yes, the Giants have a couple of weapons here. I don't know how much Russell Wilson has left in the tank. I don't know. I don't have a ton of confidence in that organization in general. So going with the Commanders out of the gates against the Giants, they're only 31% rostered. I typically don't like to do road streamers, but the Arizona Cardinals are at New Orleans, and the over-under in that game is only 42.5. The Cardinals are 34% rostered. I don't get a ton of inspiration from this defense in any case, but if the Saints are as bad as we think they might be, and I believe they had the lowest over-under win total when we went through them on last week's show, maybe you target them. But again, I don't love targeting the road team. A couple other home teams.
Does it matter to you? And people are saying this in the chat. The Cardinals then play the Panthers the following week, so you have the Saints and Panthers back-to-back weeks. Make them kind of better utility-wise, or are you still?
I don't know, but if they give up 28 points to the Saints, which I'm not saying is completely outside of the realm of possibility, then you really want to go start them against the Panthers, who we think have a better offense. So I picked the Commanders over the Cardinals this week, and another one I might look at is the Jets. I mean, defense has never really been the problem here for the Jets. They're only 27% rostered. They're at home, and the over/under is 38.5. They're at home against the Steelers and Aaron Rodgers. We'll see what that offense looks like. There's a lot of new faces there, and we'll see what, if anything, Aaron Rodgers has left in the tank there. But the Jets possible. I mean, Rodgers can't seem to really move around much at this stage in his career. And of course, coming off that Achilles injury, there could be some sacks there. We could have another situation where he gets knocked out, and then what? So yeah, the Jets at 27%. I also threw on the Patriots 15% against the Raiders, but we're probably not going that far on the list. For me, it's really probably the Commies, the Jets, or the Cardinals here with their matchups. And I lean towards the Commanders as the home team, even though they have the highest over-under at 45.5 than any of the 4 defenses that I mentioned there.
Well, there you go. That does it for us on the pre-week 1 waiver wire edition of the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast. Every Monday moving forward, right around noon Eastern, or I guess 1 Eastern time, noon Central. We'll be trying to get this up there ahead of your evening drive back from work. That's the goal for this podcast, to make sure everyone's prepared for it. If you're watching live from the article itself, I'll be updating probably semi-daily or at least daily some waiver wire targets as we get more information with the injury reports. And we're doing this all year long. We're going to help you out, make sure you get you in a good spot for your leagues throughout the rest of the season. Hopefully help you avoid starting the Giants against the Commanders week 1 if that's a defensive choice that is adamantly needs to be said.
The other side. If you've been advised that, just look at the home team in that matchup for
5 sacks against Jaden Daniels. That's not nothing, Jake. Come on now. But no, I'm all for saying the Giants defense will be better. I'm not sure I want to go ahead and bet against that week 1 with the Commanders offense that I think will be worse than last year, but not consequentially for Cliff Kingsbury and company. So that does it for us again on the Monday edition of the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast. We'll be back in next week around the same time. Again, thanks everyone for listening. If you have any more questions, at RotoJake, at JB Fantasy Sports, I'll be happy to help you out throughout the rest of the week.